The story begins with a man named David traveling by ship to a remote island. David works for the weather department, and the government has assigned him to live on this island for a whole year to report weather conditions. The ship's captain, Axel, drops David off at the island. At first, the place seems totally deserted, but after walking a bit, they find a house that was built for the weather department. When they go inside, everything's a mess. Axel immediately feels like something's wrong and that David could be in danger here. But David tells him not to worry and to just leave his luggage and head back to the ship. Just then, they spot a lighthouse, thinking maybe someone is living there. David and Axel decide to check it out. Axel sends his men back to the boat while they explore. Around the lighthouse, they see strange wooden weapons placed everywhere, which seems odd for such a quiet place. No one answers the door, so David ends up forcing it open. Inside, they meet a man named Gruner, who turns out to be the lighthouse caretaker. Axel tells Gruner that David will be replacing the previous weather officer. When Axel asks about the old officer, Gruner says he died from a disease called typhus. But when Axel asks to see the body, Gruner replies that he last saw the man heading out to sea and he never came back. Axel doesn't fully buy the story and suggests David should come back with him, but David has already made up his mind to stay. Axel gives him a gun for safety before heading back to the ship. Afterward, David starts unpacking and settling into the house. He finds a diary left behind by the previous officer, with notes about the island, sketches of strange sea creatures, and even a photo of the officer's wife. David doesn't pay much attention to it and eventually goes to sleep. The next morning, David steps outside to collect weather data and notices shells arranged in a circle, almost like someone decorated them. He ignores it and continues his work. Through his binoculars, he sees Gruner and briefly someone else too, but they disappear in a flash. David thinks it was probably just his imagination and returns home. That night, he hears strange noises outside his cabin. At first, he thinks it might be Gruner, but as he gets closer to the gate, he hears something trying to open it, making animal-like sounds. Then, bizarre noises surround the house from all sides. David rushes to the basement and hides, peeking through a crack. Soon, one of the sea creatures from the diary actually breaks into his house. One of them even peeks into the basement, scaring David so badly that he stabs it in the eye with a knife, and the creature runs away. The next morning, David steps out and sees tracks leading back toward the sea. Now it's clear the creatures only come out at night. David goes to Gruner and yells for him to open the gate, but Gruner just throws water on him and tells him he shouldn't have come here. Feeling hopeless, David returns home and starts building wooden weapons. He digs trenches around the house, fills them with wood, books, and fuel, and prepares for another attack. He also loads his gun and waits for nightfall. Later that night, the creatures show up again and try breaking in through the windows. David starts shooting at them, but eventually runs out of bullets. He sets fire to the trenches, creating a ring of fire around the house that scares the creatures off. Unfortunately, the fire also spreads to his house. David escapes with a burned hand and hides behind a rock in the rain, spending the night outside. The next morning, he sees how much damage was done and realizes he can't stay in that house anymore. He spots Gruner heading toward the sea and follows him. Suddenly, one of the sea creatures attacks him, but David defends himself and points his gun at it. Gruner appears and points his own gun at David, telling him to let the creature go. Gruner explains that this particular creature won't harm him. She lives with him. He even offers David a place to stay at the lighthouse in exchange for all his supplies: food, alcohol, tobacco, and ammo. David agrees. They move his stuff to the lighthouse and David finally gets some rest. When he wakes up, he finds the creature licking his burned hand, and it's actually healing. David, shocked, asks Gruner how the creature ended up with him and why she listens to him. Gruner tells him that he saved her life once, and ever since she's followed him like a pet. But Gruner mistreats her and uses her intimately. At one point, she even bit him, and he beat her badly. Since then, she never fights back. It becomes clear that the other creatures are only attacking the lighthouse to rescue her, but Gruner fights them off because he doesn't want to lose his slave. Gruner proudly shows David the top of the lighthouse and tells him that when Axel came with the ship, he could have left, but didn't. He says this island is his kingdom and no one tells him what to do. David, on the other hand, says he doesn't want to stay. If he sees a ship, he'll signal it. That evening, the female creature starts getting closer to David, who treats her kindly. Their bond begins to grow. Later that night, Gruner uses a flare gun to call in the other creatures and tells his creature to summon them too. He believes the only way to survive is to kill all of them. The creatures arrive, and there are a lot of them. David freezes in fear, while Gruner shoots one after another. David backs off, leaving Gruner to handle them alone. The next morning, Gruner warns David that weak people have no place here. Then he sends him out to collect water. When David returns, he finds Gruner being intimate with the creature again. Later, while they're eating, the creature lovingly offers David some food, a crab. Gruner doesn't like this and storms off. That night, Gruner again calls the creatures, but David refuses to shoot. Gruner locks him out of the tower thinking he's useless. But the next morning, David is still alive, covered in blood, but alive. He had killed all the creatures by himself. From then on, both of them fight off the creatures together. Weeks pass and the attacks stop. David wonders why the female creature keeps calling her own people here just to see them die. Gruner shrugs and says that to the creatures they're the real monsters, which is why they fight back. More time goes by. The two men take turns keeping watch at night. Gruner keeps mistreating the creature, and David feels powerless to stop him. One day David finds her bathing and gently touches her cold skin. He starts calling her Aneris, meaning mermaid. Gruner sees this but says nothing. He still needs David. One night while playing chess, David wins. Gruner gets angry and grabs a gun. David tells him it was just a game, but Gruner fires. Not at him, but at a creature sneaking in. They hadn't kept watch, and now they're under heavy attack. The creatures are too many to handle. David and Gruner hide in a small cabin where one of the creatures bites Gruner's leg. They sit there ready to die, but the sun rises and the creatures return to the sea. Aneris licks Gruner's wound, healing him. David tells Gruner they won't survive another attack. Supplies are running low. One day, David finds a locket on a creature's grave. Then he spots a ship and rushes to fire the flare gun. Gruner attacks him to stop him from leaving. Aneris tries to defend David, but Gruner lashes out at her. She runs away. The next day, David follows her and finds she's been badly beaten. He shows her a tiny boat he made from bones. She leads him to an old boat, which makes David hopeful. When he tells Gruner, Gruner says he already knew about it. Years ago, Portuguese sailors crashed there and were killed by the creatures while smuggling dynamite. David suggests using the dynamite to wipe out the creatures once and for all, but Gruner refuses. Later, David repairs the boat. As he's working, he hears Aneris bathing again. He joins her and they grow closer, something Gruner notices. Soon after, Gruner changes his mind and says they'll go get the dynamite. They dive to the sunken ship. David, in a diving suit, finds the explosives. A small creature swims up to him but doesn't hurt him. David returns to the boat safely. Back at the tower, they rig dynamite around it and wait. But no attack comes that night. Winter sets in, snow falls, and Gruner, even in the freezing cold, stays on guard. David convinces him to come inside where they drink coffee. Gruner starts beating Aneris, convinced she told the creatures to stop attacking. Later that night, Gruner threatens her to call her people again. David guards the gate. As Aneris cries out, a huge group of creatures shows up. One attacks David, but he kills it and rushes up to Gruner, telling him to detonate the dynamite. It doesn't work at first, but David fixes it and triggers the blast, killing many creatures. In the morning, Gruner is finishing off the wounded. David finds another locket just like the one from the grave and realizes these creatures aren't evil. They have families they grieve and just want to live. That night, the two men hear the creatures crying. Aneris has left to rejoin her kind. The next day, David places his handmade boat in a stone circle, hoping she'll come see it. He finds a photo of Gruner and his wife, along with notes revealing that Gruner wasn't just a caretaker. He was the previous officer. That night, David sees Aneris with her people. One of the creature's children takes the boat. David now fully understands. They never meant any harm. Gruner was the true villain. Gruner shows up with a gun and orders Aneris back inside, but she refuses. Gruner loses it and goes back to the tower. David promises the creatures he won't hurt them anymore. But suddenly, Gruner fires a flare gun, killing the creature's child. Aneris is heartbroken and leaves. David storms the tower and fights Gruner. Just as Gruner is about to kill him, David tells him he knows he's just a man like him, a weather officer. This shakes Gruner. He drops the axe and, feeling guilty, walks outside and lets the creatures kill him. A year passes. A ship arrives with a new officer to replace David. With long hair and a beard, David now looks like a true islander. When asked if he's seen David, he lies, saying David died of illness, just like Gruner did at the beginning of the story. Now David has chosen to stay, and Aneris is free, still nearby, finally at peace.